virtualization in there. So then you really need a way to know your actual virtualized storage, what is your utilization. Without that capability, you can't really manage and fully optimize the ROI of your storage. So we can help you do that. Are you using dedupe enough? Because once you virtualize, there are a lot of duplicates because you're running more OS instances, right? So are you using dedupe in your backup? If you are using backup to disk, you're using a lot of expensive disk space. And virtual environment has got a lot of duplication. So deduplication becomes a must-have technology, especially for virtual environment backup. So you have to consider that deduplication technology. And then are you leveraging common management tools around physical and virtual environment? That's important. Are you deciding to use one set of tools for physical environment and another set of tools for virtual environment? Can you afford that? Can you afford to train people on multiple tools? We have a single tool that can help you manage both. So you may want to consider that. And then on the right side is the risk. How about your DR plan? Once you virtualize a server, can you make sure that it's highly available? Can you make sure that it can be disaster recovery to a DR site? So nowadays we have a lot of different changes in our environment, right? We have got SARS a few years ago. Japan has got tsunami. We got some floods here. In Singapore we have some floods nowadays because we get a lot of rain in Singapore. Even Orchard Road gets flooded 3 times last year. Big time floods. So DR becomes even more important now. Backup automation, business critical application, can you virtualize it? Can you make sure that it's highly available? So these are the questions that you may want to ask yourself before you go full-fledged on a virtualization project, especially if it involves your last 20%, your very important servers. Servers that if it goes down, you get a phone call from the CEO, that kind of application. So the fact is, we protect, whether it's a backup or it's a cluster, we protect more virtual machines than anybody else in the industry. We are the world leader in doing that, and we have a lot of patents filed and claimed by us on protecting the virtual environment. So we basically focus on 2 things: storage management as well as clustering or rather HA in the virtual environment. In this session, I will just talk about VMware. But one thing I want you to bear in mind that in virtualization in Symantec, we don't usually just mean VMware. Right? We also have solutions that support Hyper-V. We also have solutions that support Red Hat KVM. Anybody use Red Hat KVM here? Anybody heard of Red Hat's virtualization engine? No, not in this part. So we also support that. We also support Sun Solaris domain. We also support AIX partitions. So that's what we mean by virtualization actually in Symantec terms. With Symantec, we are always cross-platform. When we want to do something, it's always cross-platform. That's the value to our user from us. So, but in this session, I will mainly just talk about VMware kind of virtualization. Oh, this is a fact, right? 2 to 8 times more storage. The storage challenge is that storage can be 30 to 40% of your budget, especially in the bad times, unfortunately. Right, during the 2008 crisis, right, a lot of users will say, okay, no more new projects, no more new servers, yeah? Because we don't know where the business is going, we don't know where the economy is going. But there's only one thing that they will continue buying: storage. Because as long as the business is open, doing business, doing transactions, they will generate data. The server can run slower and the company can say, okay, I'm not going to buy a new server until the economy becomes better. But until they say we are not going to do business, storage will continue to grow. So storage is one of the largest expenditure in the IT, especially during the bad times. Virtualization increases storage complexity and performance suffer at scale. This is especially true when you use NAS. A lot of users, when they virtualize, they like to choose a NAS solution over fiber channel because it's cheaper and performance is not bad, it's acceptable, especially when it's a VDI environment. And sometimes in a lot of server environment, users choose to use that. Who use fiber channel for your virtualization environment here? Who use NAS? Anybody use NAS? Yeah, so it's a mixture. Yeah, so for those who choose SAN, means your project is important and you have the budget. For those who choose NAS, probably you want to push your budget a little further to get more, right? So NAS is popular because it's IP based. You don't have to buy a SAN switch, you don't have to buy HPAs, and it's easier to scale in terms of capacity, not in terms of performance. Of course, performance fiber channel is better. So the promise from NAS is that it's simple to deploy, it's cheaper, it's easier to manage, and usually is a choice for virtual environment. But the shortcoming is that usually they are one-headed or two-headed architecture, already quite expensive, yeah, and it doesn't scale, because once you scale beyond what the two NAS head can do, you have to buy a new one, regardless of whether you have capacity or not. Because capacity requirement and performance requirement, bandwidth requirement is two totally different things. But the problem with normal NAS is that hardware-based NAS, array-based NAS, is that once you scale out the capacity or the bandwidth or the performance, you have to buy a new one. And the problem with virtual environment is that once you buy a new one, you will take up all the space very quickly. You know why? Because a lot of duplicates. So if you buy a new one, half of the storage maybe will be used for storing the OS again. So it doesn't really scale that much. And backup for all these devices, once they are big, can also be a challenge. Because you go through NDMP backup, you also have some shortcomings over that. If you don't use NDMP backup, then it could be worse, right? So ask a backup expert, they will tell you more. And if you're using it for virtual desktop, then you also have another problem, because desktop is different from server. It's different in the sense that desktop, people shut it down and people start it up in the morning all at one go. If your company start at 9 a.m., people coming at 9 a.m., they boot up the PC at 9 a.m. It's a boot storm, right? You will send a lot of data through the network. Also, you will have these reading terabytes of data within that half an hour. So it's a boot storm. It could be also a problem. So what we have is a solution that not many people heard of. Actually, it's called Virtual Store. What we do is that we use commodity server here as NAS heads. These are usually Linux servers or Solaris servers. Usually we will recommend using cheap Intel-based Linux server. And using our clustered file system technology, these servers can access the same disk. It can be any disk you choose. It can be EMC, it can be Fujitsu, it can be chip disk, it can be high performance disk. It's up to you. And with the clustered file system technology here, you can scale the capacity on the fly. Just like normal storage foundation uses. Whenever you run out of capacity, you buy more disk. You can buy different disk. You can expand the volume to petabytes if you want. So capacity becomes very expandable. You won't hear NAS vendor coming to you and say, okay, this enclosure has got no more slot. You got to buy another head from me. No, you just scale. You can have 3 different brands, right, connected to the same container here, and we will scale sideways as much as you want. But if your problem is not capacity, if your problem is bandwidth, right, as in maybe the gigabit Ethernet card here has got not enough, you can add one more because it's commodity Linux server, or it's because this thing run out of CPU juice, you can add another node. Because clustered file system technology, you can scale up to 32 nodes if you want. So imagine you have a 32 node NAS head. So all the requests that's coming in from the EXX server, it goes round robin across this, but they all access the same disk using CFS technology. So it's very, very scalable. And it's quite inexpensive in terms of the software license. So you don't see a lot of Symantec people mentioning about this. But this is a rather good solution. So JP Morgan uses this. And they run one farm of 32 node NAS head from us, virtual store, supporting 90,000 VDIs. 90,000. So every morning, when the people come in and they boot up the PC, this farm will serve up 90,000 OS images to the VDIs, and it still scales. That's how scalable this thing can be. And the good thing is, if you think gigabit Ethernet is not fast enough, you want 10G. Right? Changing the NIC card here is cheap because it's a commodity server. If your NAS box now doesn't support 10G and you want to change it to a 10G, you got to buy a new one. So most of the time, they will tell you, you got to buy a new one. So this one, you build your own, and you can scale it as much as you want.